I was only 9 at the time, and we had just moved to a better location. Our apartment was on the 6th floor and was the last one on the landing. It was the furthest you could go from the entrance of the building and was fairly secluded. The staircase was also completely indoors, with 4 apartments to a floor. One day, I came home from school around 2 p.m. My parents weren't due back for at least another 3 hours, and I set about doing my usual homework, watching TV, and emptying out the fridge. It was around the time that I settled down for an episode of Babylon 5 that I heard the front doorbell ring. This was very odd, as my parents both had their keys, and no one else usually visited around this time of day. I went over to the front door and asked, "Who is it?" I heard a man answer back, "Hello there, I am from the electrical company. We are doing a routine check on the electrical meters. May I come in and inspect yours? It will only take a minute." I looked through the peephole and saw a young man, probably nearing his 30s, very clean, neatly dressed, with his hair combed to the side. He held a clipboard in his hand with some papers attached. I was about to twist open the lock when something caught my eye. Because of the fisheye view I had on the landing, I could also see a little extra to the sides, on my left and the man's right. I saw a light bouncing from what looked like a sharp metal object. It took me a second, but I clearly saw what it was. It was the cutting edge of an axe. Someone was standing right next to the door, attempting to hide from view, holding an axe in their hands. At this point, my memory gets blurry. I remember stepping away from the door and creeping into my room, which was the furthest in the hallway. I closed my door and didn't come back out until my parents got back. The bell kept ringing for a few more minutes, and then it finally fell silent. I never told anyone about it until now. So these were my stories, and I think there's always something important to learn from encounters like this.
Harvey, my unfriendly roommate. This takes place in my old house where I used to live with my mom and older sister. From a very young age, I started believing in ghosts and paranormal beings because of our roommate, which we used to call Harvey. Harvey wasn't a human being, even an animal either. It's a strange entity that you couldn't see. I'm not sure if he's a ghost or a demon. All I know is that he's definitely not a human. When Harvey started appearing, he seemed harmless because all he did was just playing pranks, such as turning lights randomly on and off around the house or slamming doors. And next it was on my 6th birthday. I got a lot of presents and my grandma gave me a helium balloon with a princess on it. It just sat in a corner of our living room for a few days. It was almost completely deflated, but still hovering about 3 inches off the ground. Then Harvey started to grab the balloon and bring it everywhere in the house with him. If Harvey went into the basement or the bedrooms, we could notice that he was there because of the balloon. Because there was a balloon around him, we'd know that Harvey was following or watching at us. Of course, we were all pretty scared at first, but we eventually got used to it. Harvey seemed not to like that, so he started acting differently, like more scary things. One night I woke up because it felt like there was something heavy on my chest. I couldn't breathe, so when I opened my eyes to see what's going on, then I saw a figure sitting on my chest that looked like a little boy. He had wide eyes, and it was much bigger than any human's eye. I could see his frightening smile stretching from ear to ear. And I suddenly realized that he was holding the helium balloon in his right hand. My heart dropped at that moment. I definitely could say that it was Harvey. I screamed as loud as I could, but Harvey put his hands around my neck and started strangling me at the same time. I was overwhelmed with so much fear. I didn't understand what was happening. Then everything went black. When I woke up again, it was in the middle of the morning, and that was the last time I've ever seen Harvey in my house.
Last summer, there was a suicide by jumping from the apartment where I was living. Our apartment was a hallway-style place, and it turned out that the person deceased jumped from the hallway to a flower bed in broad daylight. A few hours after the incident, I was on my way to the security office for a moment. I saw an old lady was standing on the sidewalk, and she was looking at the pool of blood that was still remained in the flower bed. Why is she looking at that? Does she relate to the dead? Or is she sad? Thinking like this, I was about to pass by her, but she suddenly walked over to me. Then she pointed her finger at the pool of blood and said, "You know, this is a secret. I pushed her." I suddenly got goosebumps. So I ran to the security office without even thinking of answering back her words. And when I came out, the old lady, who was still standing there, grabbed me and talked to me again as if she was waiting for me until I came out. She said it like this: "Don't tell anyone. It's our secret." The look on her face was so scary and terrifying that I just nodded, saying yes, and then ran towards home quickly. Was that true? Nobody knows.
This incident happened when I was a sophomore in high school. My parents got a job in the countryside, so I was left alone in the city. I had to live on my own, so they ended up renting a small flat corridor apartment for me. For the first few days, I felt free to be myself, but also a little scared since it was my first time living alone. I felt a chill in the house somewhere, and I sometimes opened my eyes at daybreak after I moved in. For your information, I rarely woke up at dawn when I lived with my parents before. Another day, when I looked at the clock attached to the room, it was often pointed at 2 a.m. Sometimes I woke up at 1:50 or 2:10. Anyway, it was always close to 2 a.m. At first, I thought it was just nothing and fell asleep again. But it kept happening again for about a week. On that day, I opened my eyes around 2 a.m. as usual. Oh, shoot, it happened again. Thinking like this, I tried to fall asleep again, but I couldn't fall asleep at all, rolling my eyes vacantly. At that moment, I heard the sudden sound of shoes in the hallway. Because the next side of my room was the hallway and my bed was attached to the hallway, so the sound was very clear. From the elevator, he was coming toward my house. But at the moment, the footsteps gave me a sense of chilling for some reason, and I began to feel anxious that the destination would be my house. And eventually, the sound of shoes just exactly stopped right in front of my house. Shortly after the sounds of its footstep, I suddenly heard the slide of the front door lock goes up. My door lock has numbers, and when you open the slide, you press the number and close the slide. Then the door opens. So someone was literally trying to open my door. It slowly began to press the numbers one by one. I was so scared that I put on my blanket and shouted inside, "Please don't open it! Please, it's not 7 numbers!" My apartment password was 7 digits, so I started to get terrified. I couldn't move because my body was frozen in that state, and if I moved just a little, someone outside would be excited. It slowly pressed the 7-digit number and slid down the slide. At that moment, my heart sank and I felt like I was about to die. Fortunately, I heard a sharp warning. It meant the number was wrong. Thank God. But as soon as I heard the warning, it opened the slide again and pressed the number faster than before. When it got it wrong again, it pressed the number frantically. It was incomparably faster than when I pressed my password as fast as I could to go to the bathroom in a hurry after I came back from school. As the number kept getting wrong a few times, the door lock machine automatically recognized that it was an error and stopped. The outside was calmed down for a long time, so I took a breath and got out of my bed quietly. As soon as I was about to get out of bed to drink a cup of water in the kitchen, something suddenly crossed my mind. Why can't I hear the shoe sound? Is he still out at the door? And at that moment, again, it began to press the number roughly again. Come to think of it, it might have known the fact that it would work again shortly after the machine stopped, so it just waited in front of the machine. At the moment, I got goosebumps. So I ran to the front door, put a chai, and jumped back into bed. The moment I just put on my blanket, the outside suddenly calmed down again. It didn't press the number even though the machine didn't stop. Is the door opened? Shaking in anxiety, I lifted the blanket slightly, but there was no one. And as soon as I was relieved, I heard a little sound from the back of my head. To be exact, it was from under the bed. You didn't think I'd make it, did you? Did you? Did you? The moment a woman's whispering voice came into my ears, I realized it was sleep paralysis. In that state, I think I fainted without moving my body once. The next morning, I opened my eyes and went straight to the front door. Fortunately, the door was locked, and the chain above it was fine also. I opened the door and looked out just in case, but there was no one there. This time, I looked at the password slide, and it seemed fine on the outside. However, the moment I opened the slide, I felt like I almost fainted. The numbers corresponding to my apartment's password among the number plates were all scuffed as if they were scratched by a knife or something. I immediately told my parents about this, and it seemed they were worried about me, so they came right away to see me. They were also surprised to see the scratched number plates and ended up heading to the security office to see if there were any CCTV records taken at that time. However, no matter how hard we looked at it, we could not see anyone wearing shoes or unusual. There were 5 people in the CCTV, but all of them were residents of the apartment. Eventually, the door lock was replaced with a new one, and my parents stayed at home for a few days and went back again. After that, I gradually didn't wake up at dawn. I haven't believed in any unusual phenomenon in my life, but I could say it was definitely strange after experiencing them for the first time. Even now that I think about it, I think I'm getting goosebumps. It was on August 6th. I came back home after work thinking of taking a long sleep during the weekend. As soon as I arrived home, I washed up quickly, lay down in bed, and slept right away, and the time was around 7 p.m. But when I opened my eyes for some reason, it was at 2 a.m. I was wondering why I woke up so early, since I usually fall asleep on weekends and no one can wake me up. However, I decided to drink water while I was up anyway. So I got out of my bed, went to the kitchen, and lay in bed to sleep again. Just then, it was something furry, I think, and it touched my back. No, it can't be. I used to lie on my side and sleep. I opened my eyes for a while because of the strange feeling, but soon I decided to just ignore it without much thought. However, that was not an illusion. I could feel someone kept touching my back. It seemed to be rough, and there was even something sticky about it. My heart dropped, and I slowly looked back. There was a man lying there. I was sweating like the cold sweat was coming out of all the holes in my body. I've never seen such an awful look in my life. I could see his hair turned all white. The skin all came off. His mouth and nose were all crushed that I couldn't recognize his face, and he was staring at me just like that. I opened my eyes screaming and then realized it was a dream. Because of sweating a lot, I got thirsty, so I went to the kitchen drinking some water again. I lay down thinking that was the end of the nightmare, but it wasn't. I had to go through the same situation 2 more times. In the first dream, I also got up in surprise, but the second one was different. Somehow, I was courageous and eventually talked to the person. "Why are you doing this to me?" Then he beckoned to me instead of answering, and it felt as if he were asking me to follow him. "If I follow you, you won't be in my dreams anymore?" He nodded and headed to the kitchen. So I followed him, and he pointed his finger to the refrigerator, and this time he pointed to a clear glass bottle when I opened it. He then opened his mouth and said for the first time, "I know you are thirsty. Drink it." It was just a dream. However, I was so scared that I couldn't reject it, so I ended up drinking the water in the bottle. After I finished drinking, he asked me to send him off and said that he would no longer come. Unwillingly, I opened the front door and went with him. Even though my house was an apartment, there were no elevators and stairs in my dream, and we went straight out to the yard. And it was weird that my whole body began to sweat while I was walking on the flatland while sending him off. I finally arrived at the front gate and tried to take a step forward to see him leaving, but I was clearly blocked by something, even though there was nothing in front of me. He kept beckoning, but it was no longer possible to move forward. Just then, I felt the water dripping on my head, and then I ended up waking up. As soon as I opened my eyes, my legs suddenly throbbed, and the moment I came to my senses, I was purely shocked. I was on the rooftop and kept bumping my thighs and knees on the railing that was blocking right in front of me to move forward. The rainwater woke me up, saving my life just before I was almost falling from the rooftop and killing myself. The rooftop door, which was supposed to be locked, was also open for some reason. Being terrified, I ran home without even thinking about using the elevator. I was out of breath after entering the house, so I opened the refrigerator again and started drinking water. Meanwhile, I suddenly remembered the glass bottle that he made me drink in my dream. So I checked what it was, and to my surprise, it was a whiskey which I used to drink when I couldn't sleep. And the bottle was definitely full until yesterday, but there was not a sip left. To sum up, I couldn't wake up because he made me drink that whiskey. And the reason I had a hard time walking when I sent him off was that I was actually walking toward the rooftop. If my body hadn't actually caught on the roof railing, I would have killed myself and said goodbye to the world. I knew that there were people who often had this experience out there, but I was really horrified when I literally experienced it myself.